Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very proud to announce I have Mr. James Davidson. He's the master distiller of HYE Rum. They are located in HYE, Texas, which is just outside of Fredricksburg. So, James, thank you so much for your time. I know you're busy. I appreciate it. So, please tell us a little bit about yourself, and then, HYE, and, how did you get into this world of distilling?
Sure. In HYE, we are a small little country town, unincorporated. There are a couple distilleries, a couple wineries right in the middle of the wine country. I make rum. I've made over 9 or 10 different products we produce here at HYE Rum. We have flagships such as excuse me. We have flagships such as the white, dark, and spice. I got into making spirits because my dad mentioned that he thought about making whiskey back in the day. It was over 10 years ago. He never did, mind you, but it sparked an interest in me. And so I started studying scotches and eventually got into rums and really found a fertile ground for my creativity. And that's why I opened up HYE Rum.
Okay. So for those of us, now rum is a bit new to me. I just started taking a liking to it not too long ago. So I am still learning about it. Could you give everybody just a basic primer on what rum is?
Sure. So rum is defined by being made from a sugarcane product or byproduct. So if you were to get a sugarcane stalk and cut it and juice it, that would be sugarcane juice. Some health foods have it. If you ferment that, it's going to be very earthy and grassy. Now, what we use primarily is molasses. So if you refine the sugar and get the sugar out of it, what's left over is molasses, which is thicker and heavier and has heavier notes.
How, just briefly, without getting too scientific,
Sure.
How do you refine sugar to get from that to molasses?
So what they do is they heat it up and they boil it, and the sugar granules clump together, and then they centrifuge it and spin it out. So as they more they boil it, the darker and thicker the molasses gets, and the more sugar gets taken out of it.
As I understand it, there are different grades of rum. Is that correct?
Different grades of rum. So there's different types for sure.
Or different types. Sorry, yeah. Could you just briefly go through the different types of rum for, as people would use it in everyday use?
Sure. So I'll keep it pretty basic. So for what we offer, we have white, dark, and spice, which is a pretty big spectrum for what you're going to use in your cocktails or how you want to drink it. For white rums, you're talking daiquiris, mojitos. They'll be in a bunch of other cocktails. They need something that's light in flavor, but still has a little bit of that rum touch. Dark rum will be big and bold. Ours has a heavy molasses note. So we do old fashions. Dark and stormies are very popular. We also put, I think it's great in Coca-Cola. We blend in really well. Simple cocktail. And spiced rum. A lot of people think Captain Morgan and stuff like that. That's what we can do. We got a lot of holiday stuff. I love mine in apple cider. I think it's delicious.
Yes, that sounds good. What spices are usually in spiced rum?
So primarily, the spices in spiced rum are going to be like clove, coriander, nutmeg, cinnamon. There'll be some orange peel in there as well, and vanilla are primarily the spices you're going to see.
You probably think pumpkin pie if you want to know what spices are in rum.
Pretty close. So I'm telling people this. If you ever look up the recipe for Coca-Cola, it's almost the exact same spice.
Really?
Yeah. Ours is a little different. Ours is going to be a lot fewer spices, but most spice rums have a very similar profile. We'll have those same spices as Coca-Cola.
Here's a random question I just thought of when you were talking about how you're getting into distilling.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to rum, whiskey, scotch, whiskey, scotch, the same thing except for one's from Scotland. But when it comes to different liquors, vodka, gin, rum, whiskey, other than the fact that they're all distilled spirits, is there any commonality between rum and other spirits that maybe the average person doesn't think of?
So some commonalities I can think of is rum is produced a lot of different ways. So I use a pot still, which is a kind of older style. Whiskeys are often made in pot stills, so are tequilas. Some rums can often be aged as well. So I have a barrel program where I have rums that are aged. Whiskeys are aged, brandies are aged, or tequilas. So that's a commonality. There's not too much in common with gin, unless you want to think of botanicals like as spices. So that can be similar. So there's some overlap here and there, but rum's usually kind of its own little thing.
Yeah, and now you mentioned a pot still. I know there are different types of stills.
Yes, sir.
Do you mind just briefly, if there, I don't know how many there are, but if there's 2 or 3, can you just touch on like what the best application is for what type? Like, okay, you would use a pot still for this, and you would use this for,
Sure. I'll do it. I'll run that down for you. We'll keep it pretty basic, right? We want to have a
basic is good because
Yeah, you can do hours on the stills. So, so I have a pot still, which is basically going to be a big pot with a tube coming off of it and a cooler. It's called condenser. So the pot gets hot, the steam goes up through it, and then it goes through the cooler and turns back into a liquid. That's basically how distillation works, and that's what mine works for. So a pot still is going to be 1 run, 1 distillation. So you actually keep a lot more of the flavors. Now, if you're making a vodka, you have a thing called column still. Ever been to a distillery and those windows you see in the still? Those are different levels of distillation. So they have a chamber in the bottom of the pot, just like mine. But as it goes up to the top, it hits a water barrier and cools and goes back down the tower again. So it redistills within the tower many times. And what that does is it strips out the flavor. That's why you see a vodka that says distilled 12 times or 5 times. That's because more distillations removes more flavors.
And then more distillation, if I'm not mistaken, that's preferable with vodka because generally people want a neutral base. That's and knowing that gin is basically made from vodka, they want that to be neutral as possible.
Yep, because you want in your gins, you usually want your botanicals to shine, so you don't want too many other flavors coming through.
Okay, so that was column still, and then there's...
And there's kind of... you can mix and match between there. There are some stills that have 2 levels instead of 14. That's kind of a hybrid between column and pot still. In Jamaica, they have thumpers, which is... It's a whole thing, but primarily you're going to look at columns and you're going to look at pots. And there's kind of a spectrum between the two. Now, I'm sure someone can come at me and tell me there's more than that, but that in general, more pot styles be more flavor and more column styles be less flavor.
Got you. Okay. Well, that's an easy way to put it. Because I did some reading on those, but yeah, what you did was more to the point, and I can remember that a lot easier. Okay. Now with vodka, I know that a lot of vodka brands may get their vodka from the same distiller, and then they just do what they want to it to add their flavor and make it theirs. Is it the same with rum, or like with rum, like you make everything there on the property? You don't get it from anywhere else?
Sure. So I do make all the rum property.
Oh.
So for the white dark spice, I ferment, distill, infused, blend, all that kind of stuff. Vodkas and some whiskey distilleries do this too, where they do get whiskey outsourced from a big plant, something like that. It's always one of those things that a lot of people argue about. I think as long as you are being honest with your customers and you are modifying it, gin doesn't need to be fermented on site. I mean, the beauty is in the botanicals and how those are used and distilled. Or when I'm making a rum, a lot of work is before the distillation happens. So I do ferment distill on site.
So with gin, the flavor basically comes after the spirit is made, and then from there it's a matter of the recipe to however they impart whatever flavors. Granted, it always has to have a juniper flavor as a predominant flavor. So with rum, it sounds to me like you're saying the main definer, I guess, of flavor is not going to come like gin, but more in the process. Is that right?
Sure. So the white rums, you're going to need it to really work on your fermentations and how you distill, and that's going to really impact your white rum flavor because there's nothing added to it. Now the spiced rum adds spicy stuff later on, so that is a lot of the flavor comes from after distillation. The same thing can be true for whiskeys, tequilas, brandies. All those, it's going to be your fermentation and how you distill is really going to impact your clear product, and then your aging program is going to further affect that. If you have a bad fermentation and you don't distill as well as you could, your aging program won't work as well as it should.
Okay. Now, and then some rums are aged in barrels, you said, right?
That's correct.
And is it safe to assume that when you age rum in barrels, it will take some of the sweetness out? Or is that, I just took a guess at that. I don't know.
No. So sweetness in rum is always an interesting thing I talk to people about because I hate to say a myth, but because it's made from sugar, it doesn't mean it's sweet because the yeast eat all the sugar and they produce the alcohol.
That's right.
So a lot of rums are sweet, to your point, because they add sugar later on. The base product, the white rum, our white rum, is no sugar added. And so it's actually not sweet. It has some vanillas and butterscotch notes. That comes from the fermentation and the actual molasses. So a lot of companies, like Spanish style rums, they age in certain types of ways, and then they will add sugar later on to kind of back sweeten it to make it sweet again.
So if you taste a rum and it's sweet, then it has to be because they added sugar towards the end of or after the fermentation process.
Yeah, pretty much. There's some barrels can part sweetness. So if I were to use like a sweet wine barrel, then I could get some sweet notes from there, but it wouldn't be sugary. It would just have that kind of bright.
Right, like sherry casks or certain oaks. Yeah. Like I think, if I'm not mistaken, American oak imparts more of a kind of vanilla and spice character.
Vanillas, yeah. Yep.
Ah, that's interesting.